Hi Gina.
Hi Ione, hi everyone. I'm Gina, the senior editor of Polyester.
And I'm Ione, the founding editor-in-chief of Polyester, and this is the Polyester Podcast, a feminist pop culture podcast dissecting the discourse on a weekly basis.
Before we start, if you're a fan of this podcast, please make sure to like, rate, subscribe and review. And if you really love us, you can sign up for a podcast membership where you can join our WhatsApp chat, get access to our research each week, and get on our Instagram close friends for only £3 a month. We also now have a Substack called Non-Threatening Boys, where we'll be sharing exclusive podcast episodes once a month on the Boy of the Hour. Do you have any reviews, Ione?
We do. 5 stars, the very meaning of nuance. Love how you bring levity and crack up humour to all of your discussions and disagreements. It's refreshing to hear people not feeling like they need to agree with each other or to speak from a very shallow interpretation of feminism. You all are effortlessly intersectional, and that's super heartening for this Indigenous woman from Ayatora to hear. Much love, Matariki.
That's lovely.
That is very lovely. Thank you.
What's the name?
I think the Matariki is at the end, right?
Oh, usually you say the username and sometimes it's funny.
Oh, no, it's not a joke one.
Okay.
But they're from New Zealand,
Okay,
so I didn't say it because it's self-explained.
It said it already.
In the review.
Okay, fab. It's a self-contained review.
Yeah.
I like them putting that all reviews should sign off their name.
Yeah, I guess, but some people want to be snakes and not say their name.
Yeah, that's only when they're being very, very rude.
Very, very nasty.
Very, very harsh.
Okay, what are we talking about today?
Okay, we're talking... You scared already?
Yeah.
We're talking about the Slumflower, who is an online feminist critic and influencer. Went on a podcast recently, Zizi Mills' podcast, talking about feminism, and in it, there's been a viral clip of it going around on socials where she says she sees marriage as a form of sex work.
Yes.
That is what we're talking about today.
So, yeah, basically, for anyone that doesn't know who the Slumflower is, although I'm sure, well, Americans probably don't know who she is, to be fair.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I never know who's famous over there.
She's an influencer / writer /
feminist critic, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess. And she has a podcast, Slumflower Hour, I think it's called, which is like just her speaking. And so she went on Zizi Mills' podcast, who was on Celebrity Big Brother. Did you even watch Celebrity Big Brother?
I did.
Yeah, she was on it.
Yeah, I remember. That's how I was like, Zizi, fancy seeing you here.
So some of the direct quotes from the podcast include her saying that prostitution is when you sleep with a man or hang out with a man and get money. In marriage, women expect men to take care of them financially and provide a home, while women fulfill the role as homemakers, raising and rearing the kids. So these women partner with the men to get love and validation and upkeep. The man understands and believes that he can fulfill this role for the woman. Then the arrangement works because marriage is an arrangement. It's prostitution in the sense that there is something you're looking for, just not monetary.
Yeah.
Zizi then says that prostitution is sexual and nothing but sex, whereas marriage is a build of relationship, friendship, family is involved, and kids. Chidera the Sunflower then says that the reason she thinks marriage is sex work is because once you stop fulfilling your duties as a homemaker, your husband will leave you because you fulfilled your service. She's mentioned examples like women gaining weight. But guess we're fucked then.
Well, I'm fat already, so...
It started fat. And he decides he doesn't want to be with her anymore. Maybe the libido is low, so the man moves on, or she becomes disabled and needs long-term care, and he leaves because he can't be asked. Once men stop seeing you as a woman that can fill that transactional needs that they want from you, the energy switches up very quickly.
I hate the transactionalness that it's been framed as.
So this has kind of been like running for a week or so now. Chidera's Instagram stories are still like absolutely full of like discourse about it basically, and it's blown up on Twitter as well. And then there's just so much to dig into it. I think like, where should we start?
I think let's start with the statement and then go into the wider context of it.
What do you mean?
Like our thoughts on it.
Okay, go on.
So I think there's like a number of reasons why I don't like the phrase that marriage is sex work. I think I just mentioned, like, I think framing marriage as transactional is really like archaic. Like the way that she's kind of said things, being like, oh, women get into relationships to receive these benefits, they become a homemaker, and then men get involved with it because they want sex, and then if they can't have sex with you anymore, they move on.
I guess people would argue that marriage is archaic, though.
Yeah, exactly, but I think marriage has been redefined.
Okay, anyway.
You're a married woman.
I know I am.
And then I think The second part of it is kind of just like the way that, or you mentioned this when we were discussing it earlier, like autonomy's just kind of been removed from women in this kind of like phrasing of it, and additionally from sex workers as well.
Well, yeah, I think my problem with it is that it's obviously just like a really inflammatory statement that is kind of engineered to get this kind of attention. But B is that it like Jadira's coming at it from an angle that she's trying to destigmatize sex workers by being like non-sex workers and wives look in the mirror more in common than you think. Like you're only offended because you're offended by the notion that you might be a sex worker, which is like SWAFI, which stands for sex worker exclusionary radical feminism. But I think it does neither of that because it kind of takes autonomy away from both parties.
I think it's one of those things where like you can kind of understand the logic of it, but you don't necessarily, that logic can't really be applied to real life and real relationships.
Well, no, I also just think that sex workers are probably sick of being used as like a point of, you know, like a got ya, like a got ya moment.
Like a chip.
These are people, these are like women with jobs, and not just women with jobs, like they're workers. Like, why don't you say like, oh, being married is like having an office job. It's transactional. Like you provide a service for money. Because that's what sex work is. It's a job.
Yeah, exactly. And even like we were just watching a film before this, and like I was thinking,
you can say what we were watching.
No, it's not, because it's not related to the plot. But I was just kind of like, actors are using their bodies in very much the same way, and I was thinking like, if I was going to a day at work, would I rather like just shag someone and have it be over in an hour, or have 3 days of having like really coordinated, like fully nude, like engineered sex scenes with someone, like acting? And I think I take the former. Like everyone like makes decisions about like their own personal decisions on like what kind of work they want to undertake in their life, that they're like able to undertake in their life. And I think like we need to just, there's a really good meme in the research which is just like sex workers work and bad, and then it's like sex workers work and so work is good, and then it's like sex workers work and all work is bad, and it made me laugh.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on what you were saying as well, did you see that thing going around about Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh?
Yeah, oh my god, tell the listener.
So like Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh are on that press tour for, what's the film called?
Misery Sadness film about sadness and misery for A24.
We Live in Time, which is the film that Florence Pugh famously shaved her head for. And but also, I was saying, I don't think it's all what it seems, that film. I think there's going to be a twist.
Oh, there's definitely going to be a twist, and it's going to be like A Little Life, where it's like, another one, another one.
Anyway, so they're doing this like extremely flirtatious press tour at the moment. And Andrew Garfield was like, oh yeah, in one of the sex scenes, we just got like so into it that the director yelled cut and we didn't hear. And then we like came up for air and he was standing with his back turned like to the wall.
Yeah, the cameraman as well. Like I was staring at the walls while you crack on with it.
I saw a really good tweet as well, like Harvey Weinstein chuckling in prison because his like way of getting promos still working, like saying the sex scenes are real.
Oh my, is that what he used to say?
Like pioneered that, yeah.
Crazy.
Anyway.
But still, even that, like people will be like, well, that's not sex work, that's acting. And like really trying to like delineate like what is sex work and what isn't, in a way that like just further stigmatizes sex work.
Yeah, well, no, this is what I was actually going to say, because I feel like with these mind games, like they're so
they
are mind games.
So
like they're so middle class dinner party coded, right? Like all these like upper, like all these people with like cozy jobs, raking loads of money, sitting around a table going, thought game, what if marriage is actually sex work? And they all go, when really like these types of conversations do nothing to stigmatize sex work, and everything just to piss everyone off, like on all, you know, on every side of the coin, everyone is pissed off about it. And what annoys me about like in general this type of rhetoric and the rhetoric we have about sex work on the internet is it's just like, oh, you annoyed, and then people arguing with each other and nothing to talk about actually what like legalization looks like, what like decriminalized sex work looks like, what sex workers want as well. Because as far as I know, the Slumflower does do sex work, but obviously a single voice doesn't speak for all of sex work, like all sex workers, and there's actual like things built for that, like makeshift unions, like groups, like all of these types of things. But instead we're like focused on like, oh, is my like heteronormative relationship actually like sex work? And that's also not to say that there isn't value in like talking about the exchange of things within a relationship and a marriage. Like we talk as a generation, as people, like loads about, oh, does the boy do any housework, this, that, especially when you have kids and stuff like that, like equal delineation of like household tasks. And I guess what you've said about redefining the marriage is important, but I don't really think, I think at the end of the day, what I was saying earlier is that patriarchy dictates how we live under marriage and how we treat sex workers, and both of those things are the same. Like both of those things, like that apple is rotten right to the core vibes. And until we dismantle the actual like systems that that like hold women back in marriages for people to then think that they can make a non-comparison to sex work. Not that sex workers are held back, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think it's just all this rage baiting without actually any action coming from it. It's just really difficult to pass, and it's kind of just reminds me a bit of like those YouTube videos where it's like story time, that time that I fell into a lake and an alligator ate me, and it's just like made up. Like it's just that thing of like, what can I use next to get the numbers in? Because I don't know, it's just difficult to have all like these nuanced conversations that have so much more to them, like about like that a bit more nebulous about like how life works, how relationship works, how we all exist under patriarchy, taking all those things and bulleting it all down to like one statement and saying this is what I think, and then throwing it out there for everyone to argue about in a more nuanced way. I think like I understand why that happens. That's literally like what podcasting is. It's just difficult when people say that that's just all that Chidera is saying, and that's all like what that kind of statement represents.
And with that, we will go to a break.
And we are back. How are you feeling?
I'm fine, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Never done a post-break check-in before, but it's a heavy topic.
Yeah. And also, I think it's like important to note that obviously this isn't a thought that just like popped into this one person's brain. Like, since the beginning of time, there has been like comparisons between marriage and sex work and like how those run parallel to each other. So a lot of people were kind of saying that Chidera was citing this person called Frederick Engels, who wrote Origins of the Family, Private Property and the State. This that I'm going to read is from the section called The Monogamous Family. It says, the legitimate wife was expected to put up with all this, but herself to remain strictly chaste and faithful. In the heroic age, a Greek woman is indeed more respected than the period of civilization, but to her husband she is after all nothing but the mother of his legitimate children and heirs, his chief housekeeper and the supervisor of his female slaves, whom he can and does take as concubines if he so fancies. It is the existence of slavery side by side with monogamy, the presence of young beautiful slaves belonging unreservedly to the man, that stamps monogamy from the very beginning with this specific character of monogamy for the woman only, but not for the man. And that is the character it still has today.
I think that is, again, like I said at the beginning, like it's just kind of like this archaic take on what the relationship between a man and a woman is. Like, I think it's interesting.
I mean, it is archaic. It's from the 1800s.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting for us to have that, even for Chidera to bring it up, like that conversation about what does marriage mean to us all now, because I think that's something that was brought up again and again as a critique to her, which I think is quite cruel, was saying like about how that people just see their own relationships as not transactional and like trying to like have like a one-up on it, like trying to say that that's better.
I think like most relationships are transactional, like any type of relationship you have with someone is transactional in some way. But
what I mean is that people are trying to say that it's wrong because Chidera's like for the past couple of years been using this type of feminism to talk about like why you should only date rich men, for example, and it's something that she's been like using to retaliate to people on her stories and being like, look, if I'm going to get into a relationship with a man, I need him to provide for me in these ways, otherwise like I just don't think I get anything from it. And it's interesting that people's way of retaliating to her train of thought is to like show off about their own relationships.
I mean, I don't think people are necessarily doing that. I think it's just like more that people, like part of what she's saying is right in that people feel attacked when they see their relationship compared to something that they don't consider legitimate, which is sex work. And I think that's what irks me about this whole conversation, is because like it's sex workers that will always lose, because like the people that are married are obviously stable enough about marriage to have gotten married. Do you know what I mean? And it's like they have either reckoned with what that means to them to be part of like the institution of marriage or not. They just want to do it because that's what they believe in and that's their belief system. Whereas like it's never really on the table whether like marriage is a legitimate thing or not, because it's what the foundation of our society is built on, is like marriage and procreation and making kids and like having all of these things. And whereas like sex work exists on the opposite side of the coin, where it's considered like the least legitimate thing you can do in society. So I think at worst this just gives people, yeah, as you said, like it's kind of bad-minded, because it just gives people an opportunity to be like, well, I'm married and it's great, I have a great marriage and I have this and I have that. And so it would never be like this, because these are the preconceptions I have towards this like line of work and what I think it's like.
Yeah, and that's what I mean when I'm saying, sorry if I phrased it wrong, but like that people are like trying to just like show off, like use this as an opportunity to show off that they got like the one guy who isn't like that, the one guy who patriarchy hasn't affected, and they're like in the one relationship that patriarchy hasn't affected. It's like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, I just think your thinking is still very like individualist on the conversation.
What do you mean?
Like, because you're saying that like, I think the problem with the conversation in general is that it is just individuals talking about their individual circumstances, and it fails to see like it from a bird's eye point of view.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that. I'm just saying that I think the people who are trying to critique Chidera are doing the same thing, like making it about themselves.
I mean, that's just the internet though.
Yeah, true. But we're trying to like pull it out into the wider conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's also something to say about the heteronormative nature that people talk about marriage these days as well.
Just throwing it out there.
Just adding it in.
I mean, I think they're probably, because the basis of this argument is like based in the fact that, yeah, like a woman marries a man and that a man is soliciting sex work. Do you know what I mean? Like a man is soliciting sex work from a woman. It like relies on these like quote unquote basic facts in order to uphold the thesis of it. But I mean, I don't even know like how much it's worth even like digging into it that much more in terms of like the fight and the questions, and yeah, more towards what you were saying about like rage baiting and that as a business model, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that we have noticed, as well as people who are clipping this podcast specifically and putting it onto online. Like, we very pointedly avoid that, and like we go against rage baiting because we don't want to have that happen to us just for the sake of engagement.
I mean, I don't know if that's true.
I think that's definitely true. There's so many times where we're like, we can't put that meme first, we can't use that quote, we can't do that because we don't want to like misconstrue our opinion, or we don't want to start a discourse in the comment section that isn't something that we're like actually like backing 100%.
I mean, I think a lot of people just have a higher tolerance for being at the helm of like the internet because it makes them money.
Yeah.
Like, I think when it comes down to it, this statement isn't even necessarily about like feminism or marriage or sex work or any of that. It's about like coin. People like the Sunflower and podcasters getting their coin. Like, even this morning I saw Boris Johnson was on Diary of a CEO, the Stephen Bartlett podcast. And he like it came out an hour ago, and straight away they had like all the clips in at Lorraine, because I watch Lorraine every week. And they had like, so how many children do you really have? And all of these types of things. And even the fact that Stephen Bartlett's had Boris Johnson on, like, I'm not saying Stephen Bartlett is like a, you know, moral compass or like has any sort of morals, but that podcast has become so big for doing exactly that. Like, I remember when they had Davina McCall on and they were clipping the tiny bit of her being like, I did coke when I was 10.
Yeah.
It was literally that.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing with like the podcasting industry becoming so big, is that people are doing podcasts so that they can get those internet clips and then use those internet clips to build their profile, so then they can get brand deals and do more. Like, it's not necessarily that they have a love for podcasting like we do. Or like are using that time that during that podcast to have like a specific point of view and share it. They're literally just doing that format so that they can record it and have extra video content.
Well, I guess a podcast is what I was saying at the beginning, where it's like a bunch of middle class people sitting around a dining table going, what if?
Well, yeah, that's the story of my life.
What do you mean that's the story of your life? That's the opposite of the
not
story
the
of your
middle class
life.
bit, but the sitting around a table and going, would you rather?
No, I hate that though. Like, I hate it. Like, I just feel like it's so like lost in like a time of like internet. Like, it's obviously how Twitter operates and how so many spaces still operate. But for me, it's just like something that you get over when you're 18 or 21 or whatever. Like, it's the idea that like feminism and social politics don't exist in the real world.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that a few times, being like, when you take these things, it's like, what if? Yeah, right. Well, if my man had wheels, she'd be a bike.
Yeah, it's true.
There's always the what ifs that never really lead to like any actual progress or like progression in even the conversation.
And I think it's also like an issue with academia being like, I think academia should be like filtered down through a pop culture lens, but it also means that we take academia as seriously as we take it, because nothing is to say that like Frederick Engel is more experienced or worthy of stating these facts than the slumflower. But I think if anything, it just kind of shows how stupid like academia and theory is.
Oh my god, you're so right. Like, I was thinking this when I was reading through the research, and like, why do we, like, as soon as someone says like, this is the like based in theory, this is based in like fact, this is not fact, obviously facts are facts. If this is based in theory, this is based on an essay that I read, and like I've done my research and like come to this conclusion, like that doesn't make it any more.
It's like, cool, you read 10 other people's opinions.
Yeah, literally, and then like came to your own. Isn't that just like how a conversation is? Isn't that just like how you live your life? Like, isn't that like how you decide who you vote for? Like, it's not like that doesn't make your opinion more true because you found 5 other fuckers who agree with you.
No, I agree.
In history.
No, yeah, definitely. And like, obviously, if you're informed of opinion, it means you can like speak from a place of confidence, I guess. But that also doesn't like override an innate feeling of knowing whether something's like good or bad, right or wrong.
Yeah, I think in uni as well, like what I learned was to be like, I've got this idea, let's find 5 theorists to back me up.
Yeah, 100.
Rather than be like, I'm going to read 10 theories and then form my opinion. And I think that's kind of like the place that we found ourselves in now. Oh, well, we've always have found ourselves in.
It's like confirmation bias, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. It's like leading questions.
And I also think it's interesting that we're seeing, so me and Gina just came from, and the whole team just came from watching Anora, which is a film that like ostensibly deals with the exact same, not even the exact same, but it uses like marriage as a lens to discuss sex work, I guess. And like to watch something that takes, like, is obviously about sex workers and like their lives and like all of that, but through like a creative narrative lens versus like a bad mind rage baiting lens, is what has been like interesting to place side to side in my mind, I guess. And I wonder, well, I don't wonder, like, I wonder which does more. And I'm not saying everything has to have the point of like, this is for the rights of sex workers, but I know that the writer director is also really passionate about that. But I wonder what does more for like, you know, the public image of sex work positively.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I don't think this bad mind, like, oh, you're actually more like them than you think, does much.
No, and I think that's what's the joy of fiction, is that you can you can add in empathy and nuance, and like you don't really know who you're meant to agree with, whereas like with these kind of like rage baiting short clips on social media and then the longer podcast episode and then people bringing in the theorists, the problem with that is that it defines these things as right or wrong.
Yeah, it's true. Like, we don't, because that's how social media is positioned as well. It's like you can either argue for or against something, and you can't, there's no room to discuss anything else.
Yeah, there's nothing better than being like, oh, I don't really know, to be honest. I love pulling that. I love pulling that in an argument.
What do you mean?
I don't know.
Give us an example.
I'm not a genius. I'm not sure what I think.
Why is that good in an argument?
I think it's nice to just admit, like, oh, maybe I should read more into it and form an opinion, rather than just be like, ramble straight in the comment sections because you've read 4 tweets last week about what you think on sex workers.
I mean, I think if there's anything we could all learn, it's like to not be in a comment section or to not tweet something.
Or just be more open to not knowing.
Yeah, I'm with that. We will round off this episode.
Yeah, that was a fun journey to go down.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Ione.
Thank you to Siham for the research and Olivia to editing, and to everyone for listening. We will see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.